Chris, I'll let you take it from here.
Great. Thanks, everybody, and good morning. Welcome to the HR Cloud and Coffee discussion. My name, again, is Chris Oglesby with MorphWorks, and my co-host, Bill Hunt, with SPA. And we're excited about the show and our guest today. Again, before the introductions, the HR Cloud and Infrastructure Working Group is bringing this platform with a goal of bringing lessons learned and ideas to the HR community. Our focus will be a conversation about our guests' experiences, past and present, on executing modernization and transformation efforts. There's a Q&A feature at the bottom, so feel free to enter in questions, and we'll rotate through those questions as we go through the show. Moving on to introductions, Nagesh Rao is the acting CIO at the Bureau of Industry and Security at the Department of Commerce, which got our fingers crossed, moving to full CIO here shortly. Nagesh brings a private and public sector experience to our discussion this morning. But probably the most important part of Nagesh's experience is his time at SBA with our one and only Bill Hunt. So I know there's got to be lots of stories there. So I don't know who wants to tell the story first, Bill or Nagesh on that time. So
I'm in Bill and Chris's domain, so I think it's better for the Lion of the Lion's Den to be able to go first.
Well, let's jump in. Let me start with the most important question now that we have dragged you onto the show.
Yeah.
What are you drinking?
Oh, yeah. So I've got a little bit of a concoction mix of peppermint mocha I made at home.
Okay. Is that a recipe you can share with the audience after they've sat through a full hour of the show?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's not that difficult.
Don't give it away now. You have to save it for the end. You have to force it.
We'll just say it probably tastes better in one of those jam jars, right?
Yes, it does. well, and it's funny. I don't think most folks know my background, but I used to be a coffee jockey. I used to be a barista at Starbucks.
Oh,
20,
not
like
know that background.
25 years ago. It was like I was in college at the time, and I needed some pocket change, and I was TAing chemistry, but they don't pay students that well when you're being a TA, right? And so as I was TAing chemistry, I was like, well, there's got to be something that pays a little bit better. And the Starbucks was hiring, so I was like, well, it'd be kind of cool to go work there, and you get a pound of coffee free each week you work there, and when you're working there, you get to have a drink or two of the coffee drinks. I don't know what the rules are now for a barista partner, but back in the day, it was 30 minutes prior to shift, during shift, and 30 minutes after shift. Starbucks would allow you to drink or whatever you wanted to drink. I mean, obviously within reason and not go nuts about it. And it was fun because I did that for a few years throughout college and stuff, and I learned an awful lot. I think in the services industry, you learn how to deal with complex characters, especially those who are looking for their caffeine pickup before and after, right? So like that 6 a.m., like I don't think most folks really understand when you work a service industry gig, like at a fast food joint or a coffee shop or whatnot, that 6 a.m. rush is legitimately real. Mm-hmm. And I remember those moments where I was like, there are just folks there who are like, and they're the regulars. They're like, if they do not have that cup of caffeine in their system by like 6:05, very, very like 6:05 in the morning, oh, you got ripped a new one real fast.
I mean, I think we talked about this a little bit before. I bartended my way through the .com crash. Yeah. When technology evaporated for a couple of years there, and pretty much everything that I ever needed to know about working in technology I learned from that job, because you're dealing with people every day trying to fulfill their unreasonable demands and expectations of the world around you. You all probably had it harder because you had everybody at the beginning of the day when they were non-caffeinated, and I had them after they had the shitty day and had to spoon feed them alcohol to wash away all of the pain and the voices in their head.
And then try and get rid of them.
But it's that same thing, right? People come in with a particular set of unreasonable expectations, and your job is to somehow fulfill them, through whatever you can do, which now we do with technology instead.
Yeah, it's funny when they ask for the crazy, I was very reasonable. If someone asked me to do something, I always did it. I think there was only one rule where I was I just couldn't do it, and I would always ask someone else, can you put this drink together? And it was this combination of coffee, chocolate, and orange. I cannot do Valencia. it makes like I tried it out and I was like, ooh, my wife loves coffee, chocolate, not coffee. She loves tea more. Chocolate and orange, she loves that stuff. Me, not raspberries. It took a while for me to acclimate to that. And so whenever, this is again 25 years ago, but when that customer would come in and ask for it, I'd be like, hold on, let me get someone else. And they were always kind of curious why I wouldn't do it. And I just said, look, you want it done right. And I'm not going to be able to put my heart into it if I don't do it right. So let's get someone who will actually do it right.
Excellent. Well, I mean, it's good to have that humility and realize someone else has the expertise.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You never want to be the smartest person in the room. When you are, that's dangerous.
It's time to leave the room and find a new room. Yes.
Yeah.
So speaking of finding a new room and leaving the room, I will definitely say that it goes without saying that you were definitely the smartest person in the room in most of the meetings that we had at SBA, which is not to malign any of our colleagues. But so let's step back for a second. Let's rewind to roughly almost however many years it's been since COVID and all of this started. So you and I found ourselves
1 year ago around this date.
Almost a year to the day. Yeah. We found ourselves as the respective directors of the IT of SBA, and all of a sudden a pandemic started to hit.
Yep.
And I think most people who listen to this have already heard a lot of like my stories from this and are bored to death. But your team was really, really at the forefront of most of what the American people know of as the recovery effort with SBA, to get those loans in the hands of all the small businesses. Can you start us off today and talk a little bit about like what that looked like, and starting with sort of like what was the transformation that you had to like implement into the agency to really have that be a success?
Well, thank you, Bill. One, you have to have strong leadership at the top, and we had some strong leadership at the top, empowering and listening to all data points, and then figuring out what the next phase needed to be. So that was one. But two, it was just a shifting of priorities, right? So we had my bits team that I oversaw had probably 7 or 10 different projects in flight, and we were coming to fruition on a few of them when the pandemic hit. And so all of a sudden you have to take assessment of who's working on what and then rejiggering priorities. It's why I'll be quite frank, I'm not a full fan of the Scrum methodology. I'm fans of parts of it. I don't think, I got really annoyed during my time at SBA when I would hear Scrum, Agile. And I said, okay, there's an appropriateness to it, but I think for government IT and dealing with government bureaucracy, Scrum and Agile methodology is not a perfect fit. You have to have it as a hybrid, in my personal opinion, with Kanban approach. That's what I found to be more effective. Waterfall never made sense to me. When I first joined SBA 7 years ago, I was on a project that was going through a waterfall methodology, and I was like, this is stupid. Like, if I'm making changes, I want to be able to make changes now. I don't want to make changes afterwards. And so I quickly jumped off that, and I did test out Scrum methodology, but it didn't make full sense because you have a whole overarching list of priorities, and then you have to figure out what are the key priorities of the quarter. And so that's why I'm more a fan of a Kanban/Scrum approach, where you can have the overarching priorities from a Kanban, and then priorities for the quarter, you can do a little bit more Scrum. But going back to answer your question, it was, quite honestly, it was intimidating. It was an intimidating situation. And I'm going to be a little bit more frank in the sense of, like, I fucking thought if we did not do this right, we would fail the people. And so what was running through my head the entire time was, I cannot fail. There is no room to fail. And so pulling the team together and huddling them through and saying, this is the priority of the day. Drop everything you're working on, finish up anything that can be fixed and finished up, and then tell folks we're on pause until we figure out this next phase. And I give credit also to leadership. They clued me and the team on with like the legislation that was flowing through with the bills for both PPP and IDLE. and being able to, being an ex-policy guy, because I worked on SBIR policy and stuff like that, I knew pretty quickly how to read and interpret the law with the team, and then be ready from a technology perspective of like, okay, this is what the policy requirements are. This is most likely what the business requirements will need to be. So then what are the appropriate technology solutions for the customer base to utilize? What you know, if most of the customers are using a particular browser, or they're using a particular web solution, or they're used to, you know, authenticating a certain way, how do we make it as painless as possible? It was a humbling experience overall. You know, I miss working with the team at SBA in some aspects, like Maria, Guy, you, Melvin, Craig, and Antonio, and the team. Like, it was a good camaraderie. You know, the Bits team was, they got it. They understood it. And yeah, I used cliches of nerdy cliches of the sort. Like I would always say Avengers Assemble, or you know, whatever it takes and stuff like that. But it drove them forward. It got them ginned up and ready to go.
So real quick, I want to dive into the Kanban discussion, because I think, you know, you guys are talking barista and bartending, which quite honestly, I grew up in construction. So,
Yeah.
you know, we didn't talk Kanban, we didn't talk Agile, but it really is the Kanban piece, right? The waterfall piece, if you're doing that in construction, you stop.
Yep.
Right. Agile has a little bit of that, and then I agree with you. Kanban is, okay, well, what actually can we do? We don't have this piece right now. What can we do in the meantime, right? And so, you know, did you have situations in that you know, kind of that mission where you know, pieces weren't quite baked, and so you had to go onto a different piece before you could come back, that kind of kept the ball rolling, or was everything kind of, you know, just running parallel and everything worked out smoothly because of, I can't imagine smooth actually happened.
I think we had a lot of the pieces of the puzzle on the table. It was more about how do you organize it in an appropriate fashion, and then using the tools of the trade to fashion it out, right? So, you know, it's like a chemical equation, right? You have different variables in play, and you figure out, as each piecemeal process of the reaction, to build out from time. So there was part of it, and then the pieces that were missing, we, you know, quickly sat down with the team, made a case for why these different pieces needed to be procured quickly, and this is that whole offense defense play, right? So like I made sure we always were in constant communication with not only leadership, but with our peers in the CFO office, with our peers in the procurement position, and with industry and whatnot, and saying, okay, here are the problems that I am foreseeing potentially coming online. What do we have in the pipeline, or what do we have potentially in the pipeline that can help kind of mitigate? I mean, at the end of the day, when you look at PPP and IDLE, it was just a case management system. Applications coming in, case management system, figuring out what the data needed to pull from the application that was relevant enough to approve said loan, or approve said funding opportunity, and then making sure it was done in such a manner that it was valid enough. Like, you know, there's a risk tolerance you can accept. And it was funny when you think about it, because I think a lot of folks, you know, when you saw the news media pick up on the story, you know, obviously they want to paint whatever picture they can paint to just get clickbait happening, right? And so an easy way to get clickbait happening is, you know, scandal. You know, everyone's more interested in scandalous situations, and personally, I like to be boring. I'm a boring kind of guy. And so it was easy for me, because I was not trying to look for fame and fortune. I was looking for path of least resistance, legally done right, in accordance to the law, and helped people get what they need.
I mean, you make a point that obviously resonates with me here, specifically around, like, I mean, we're here to serve the mission, right? We are public servants. We're here to serve. And we very rarely get like acclaim for success.
Yeah.
You know, like you don't see a lot of news articles or congressional hearings about what a great job you did. We just wanted to bring you here and like say you did a great job. I mean, you know, we have the Fatara awards that Mr. Connolly does. But aside from that, there's not a lot of like praise being given out. But your team, again, credit where credit is due. Your team successfully helped this agency move $350 billion in loan money. You were at the forefront of most of that. Can you talk for a
Wasn't it
little bit?
700 billion? I thought it was 700 billion.
It was a lot of billions.
Yeah,
There were many
the first round
billions.
was 350, and then they did the second round. I stayed till the end of the second round, and then Commerce was like, "You need to come over here and fix up what we've got, fix up stuff here." And then I said, "All right." And yeah. Go on. Sorry.
No. I mean, I appreciate the clarification. So can we talk? I mean, it's Cloud and Coffee. Let's talk a little bit about the tech side of things. You know, we don't have to. We can go as far into the weeds as you want to go. We are SBA, for anybody who is listening and does not know, SBA is a bank. At the end of the day, effectively, for most practical purposes, you can think of SBA as a bank. That means we still have mainframes, we still have legacy code running, we still have Cold Fusion over here that we're running. And the things that you're talking about, Nagesh, about being able to stand up this sort of like flexibility, this sort of like dealing with this load and volume, which is unprecedented. Usually when we have a national disaster, it occurs in one specific location. SBA responds in that specific location, but you had to deal with a nationwide disaster that was going on simultaneously everywhere. And obviously, with the name of the show, cloud had a major part to play in how you all went about solving that. Can you talk a little bit about like what changes that you all were able to make? I mean, I already know the answers, but please go ahead and talk about the changes that you all helped to make in the agencies so that we could deal and respond with this emergency.
Yeah, sure. So I think, right off the bat, when they established Command Center, we had a physical command center, which I would go in pretty regularly to the office, and my wife was very patient and accepting of me going into the office and not teleworking. She understood that she was very she understood the mission, and I give her a lot of credit for having my back on that and not being like, no, you can't go in. She was like, no, I get it, you got to go in, but you better come home every night. And those were late nights at Command Center. But that was the thing is that given the unique situation of this pandemic and what we were dealing with, that remote work capability needed to be there. And so, for the team to stand up in 72 hours of virtual Command Center and then force folks to understand how to use remote work collaboration tools. That was pretty cool, because it really, what it did was like we had these pilots, and it forced the pilots to become mainstream adoption pretty fast. I've read the articles already. They've said in the last year, about 10 years of advances in software IT has happened as a result, because you all of a sudden now have a larger testbed environment. And so when you have a larger testbed of folks who are using remote work, remote tools and collaboration tools, all of a sudden they're pinpointing different errors that might happen on different platforms or systems, because we have a very a la carte approach when it comes to the hardware choices we have for our computers and mobile devices, and even with software. A couple of the solutions we looked into cloud, with Maria, Bill, all of us, Melvin, Guy, we were all talking, and we were like, well, we could go with what the legacy platforms and see how far they can kick the bucket along. But when you've got millions of people, I mean, it was pretty telling when the SBA.gov website got the traffic surges that it received. Like, it went from like 1 million unique visits a month to 1 million unique visits a day.
Yeah.
That was like and when Ryan and I would look at the data, the metrics coming in and seeing the number of folks going in, like every time a tweet went out or a LinkedIn share or something from the federal government about, hey, go to SBA.gov and blah, blah, blah. And, my team was overseeing that digital product among many digital products. That told me very quickly, it was like, oh, good thing we are in the cloud, because we're going to have to turn on those, we're going to have to turn on the backups pretty fast, like the extra servers that might needed to handle the traffic, because the thing is, government does not afford a lot of risk. We're risk averse, and there's a good reason why. I don't get mad or upset about our risk aversion, to be quite honest with you. I understand it. I think in part because change is very difficult to deal with. I was, when we were riffing earlier, I am the son of immigrant entrepreneurs, right? And so My father, who's still a medical doctor and still practicing medicine, he was about to retire right before the pandemic, and then he pulled back and said, "Nope, I'm going to go and help the patients." And he, obviously he wasn't going to touch the COVID patients, but he said, "I'm going to be a frontline health care worker for those without COVID, so that those medical needs are still met." He's an ex-surgeon, but he still kept his general practice. So he continued to see patients, and my mom helped him out, at the office, and helping, deal with the patients as a receptionist and stuff, because he didn't want to put the receptionists we had at risk. So my mom and dad just said, "Nope, we're going to the front lines. We're doing this." And the reason why I bring that up is because, and about change, I think they were fearless in part because of the change they saw when they grew up in India. My dad was born during British rule, and he literally saw the riots. He was, in fact, running in the streets when the riots were happening after India and Pakistan went their separate ways. And those riots were happening in his own hometown. And he was like 3 or 4 or 5 years old as those riots were happening. And he was just running, and one of our like granduncles, grandaunts grabbed him and just swooped him in before he got caught up in the whole bloodbath. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that when you have drastic change happen, people freak out. And so I would hear these stories from him and my mom about what they saw when drastic change was happening in India post British rule. And that's why you have to, we have the luxury now of having stability for such a long time. And because we have that luxury of stability, when change happens, we get very uncomfortable if change is drastic. And again, I'm taking that analogy for government, is like, that's why change is a little bit slow and piecemealed, because people are adjusting. And if people can't adjust quickly enough, they freak out.
So we talk a lot on this show about the emotional side of change, and I mean, you just nailed it right there. As a CIO, both in the situation that kind of from a technology standpoint, and we had this little bit of a chat on the other day about the risk tolerance, right? And that the government is risk tolerant, but both in kind of the response aspect, as well as kind of moving into a new organization. What's the lesson learned that you have from kind of the balance of risk tolerance and current speed of technology deployment, right? So the world in cloud is moving fast, with kind of either a response or a new role. So you came into a new organization after having just done kind of a mission saving response event, emergency event. How do you balance that? What do you look at from a technology standpoint for any of those situations? I mean, is there an inventory that you do? Is there just there's management concepts of my first 90 days, are there technology concepts that you look at that balance those pieces?
Yeah, so definitely from 90 Days in Government, the first 90 days I had that book, Melvin recommended it to me, so I got it. He said, "Hey, get that and read that before you move on to your next adventure." And I've done that, and it's a very useful methodology. And on the technology assessment side, I think part of it is that I personally got just knee deep into it. I just jumped right into the weeds and started playing around and looking at stuff and having people walk me through stuff. I did not kind of like him and haw. I just jumped right into it, took a look at stock, walked around, figured out what was working. I asked the questions: what's working, what's not working, what needs to be better improved. And then it helps in the sense like I don't know if folks know, like, and I'm wearing my alma mater, right? RPI. For undergrad, I'm a materials engineer, right? So that was my solid state physics and semiconductor manufacturing. That was my initial training and background. And so I used an engineering mindset. When talking to the tech folks, I would pepper them with engineering and mathematical and technology questions, and to assess what their current state level of competency is on the tech stack. And if it's up to speed on stuff, great. If it's not, figuring out what we needed to do to upskill them pretty quickly so that they could get up to par. So that was a lot of that. I think also just doing my homework, reading up on what was going on, physically inspecting. I did a lot of physical inspection of equipment that was being used. It helps that I, 20, 25 years ago built my own laptop. So, you can, that helps. I wasn't a great engineer. I wasn't like an expert engineer, but I had a love for engineering and science. And so that helps a lot. And, over the years, after I did my background in patent law and MBA and all that stuff, like I just figured out how to communicate in different languages.
So, I mean,
so diversity. Go ahead, Bill.
I was going to say, just digging in on that a little bit, going back to the engineer comment, I do want to say, like, there's that running joke that if you want to have like the best like engineering team, hire the most mediocre engineers you can find, because they will find the laziest way to do things cost effectively. So you really want the most lazy engineers, because they will automate all of the things and make it a lot more smooth. So those are actually the people you do want on the team. But to the other half of it, I don't want to sound like I'm blowing smoke here, but I think one of the things that you are really good at is you're a high EQ human, and you're really good at meeting the customer where they are. So coming into a new organization, as you just have, how did you were starting to tease it out a little bit, how did you sort of open those conversations and start to really figure out, like, where is your customer at, what needs weren't being met? Can you talk about sort of that journey where you started to prioritize the things that you wanted to do in that first 90 days?
Yeah, sure. I mean, part of it was just sitting down with the leadership of BIS, and I've had phenomenal leadership. Like Jeremy Pelter is our deputy undersecretary, and my peers, Kevin Curl and Matt Borman, Carol Rose, they've been fantastic to work with. And our new chief of staff, Steve Emmy, is really a cool guy, nice guy. I love riffing with him and our team. And part of that was just sitting down and understanding the business. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's fortunate enough that I do understand the business a little bit, because again, I had my prior experience working in public policy on science and tech issues. So working on SBIR, there's a lot of crossover between the Small Business Innovation Research Program and then with export administration regulations and ITAR and stuff like that. So I was already familiar with EARs and ITAR for a while. In fact, I think I would credit some of my experience around that also from my non-government experience. I work, I've done my pet projects in the private sector in my personal time. And so I'm very familiar with like export compliance and stuff of that nature, having dealt with it in the prior life. And so it made it a lot easier for me jumping in and being able to like recognize patterns pretty quickly. And a key thing I noticed right off the bat was just we need a better data methodology and data fidelity. Export licenses are issued, and then you want to make sure the export licenses are issued appropriately and effectively, and it's the right data point. So for like when a company wants to go get an export license, it's a laborious process. And so one, you want to make it as seamless as possible, but two, you want to make sure we're issuing the right licenses. And so just having that prior experience in the policy world helped me be able to, take a look, sit down, take stock, and go, okay, you as the policy or the business owner have these expectations. So as the technologist, these are the potential solutions that would meet these expectations. Mm-hmm. Like you could write, think of it, let's dumb it down for a second. If you're an author, you're writing a book and you got a typewriter, and then you get forced to use a computer to write your book. You could use Notepad. It's there on your computer. You can use Notepad. Or you can be a little bit more effective and use Microsoft Word, for example. Or you could be, what was interesting is before Microsoft got into the cloud, right? You had Google Docs, right? And so all of a sudden, that was pretty interesting about 8-10 years ago, right? When the first variants of cloud were really starting to come to fruition, where all of a sudden you could just craft a novel on your website through Google Docs, right? And then have a Google Doc and then just start typing away. And then when you were tired, you could close it out. But anywhere you went, all of a sudden, you could get on any terminal you want, log into your Google account, and start typing away your novel.
So we've got our first question from Christine, and at MorphWorks we actually phrase this a certain way. So any thoughts on dealing with folks who are deeply opposed to change and highly sensitive to any changes related to their domain.
Yeah,
At MorphWorks, we call that the pucker factor, right? It's that uniqueness of, well, what are we going to do? So I'd love to get your thought from your experiences.
yeah. You have to have those honest and hard conversations at the table. You can't shy away from it, and you've got to, whenever I've had some of those conversations, whatever capacity, position I'm in and whatnot, I've always, you got to be, there's part of it is being empathetic to the fear, right? But then you got to sit them down and explain to them, okay, here's the short and here's the long term. And then you got to drive back down to the mission. Again, like, I think it's what's worked well for me is that I don't go try to chase sexy, cool projects. I actually try to chase long-term, meaningful, sustainable projects. So any project I've taken, there's got to be a long-term horizon. If it's got a sunset, I've always made it a personal rule. If it was a project I worked on where it was going to end when I left that position, I made sure it was built in with the sunset, so that I started it, I walked it through to its fruition, and then I closed it out when it was done. But if it was going to live beyond me, I always made sure there was a succession plan of the sort built in place to help keep it moving forward, and that there was enough groundswell support for it that it would continue on. Have I been successful at that all the time? No, but you do the best you can with what you know and what you have with the variables. But to answer the question on change, it really comes down to just meeting people at the table. For me, to be honest with you, it works with pizza and soda. I just get a couple pies of pizza, get some cherry Coke, bring it to the table, and then just have that honest, hard conversation. You'd be surprised how much more you get done when you bring some food to the table.
I think, to add to it, not to put words in your mouth, but in a previous conversation, we talked about one of the keys also is, as the CIO, understanding the customer mission and customer requirements. I think that helps for you, right, when you're sitting at that table, right? And again, not to put words in your mouth, but I got to imagine that you've seen that be part of the success in G.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're right.
You can't just go with the, hey, here's what we're going to do, here's where we're going. It's hey, this is why, here's what I understand you guys are doing, am I right, et cetera. So
well, look, when you pursue a career or take a term position or whatever it may be in public service, your job is to be of service to the public. Plain and simple. If you don't want to be of service to the public, there's private sector and there's nonprofit sector. There's all sorts of other career paths you can go. But when you decide to sign that agreement and take that oath, that's swear, you don't see a swearing in ceremony in a private sector job or an NGO. You just, they say, here's your desk, here's some work, get going. The first thing you do when you join government service is you have to be sworn in. There's that unique concept there. There's that unique ethos built in. And so that's why I tell people, again, if you take a public sector job, you're here because you want to be of service to the people.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we don't sign up for the medium bucks that it pays. As you mentioned earlier, we don't do it for the acclaim. We sit behind the scenes and we carefully, again, using your words, like, just try to make sure that like things keep working, make the little improvements, move carefully and fix things, as I like to say,
I saw that. I like that tag.
Yeah. So the little bits at the time, but one thing I want to foot stomp here that you mentioned that just really resonates with me is this, starting with the end in mind thing. I did spend several years in the nonprofit space trying to fix government from the outside, whatever that meant. I also, I think as anybody who knows me knows that I've shut down more projects than I have actually initiated and completed, because that's the nature of the nonprofit world. You're constantly shutting down things, that just don't work or unsustainable, or that the funding has gone away, or any number of things. And that really has shell shocked me into making sure that any project I do, especially in government, begins with that end in mind. And you also use the magical phrase that to me is the most important thing in government technology: sustainability, right? You need to make sure that whatever you're doing has a sustainable path forward. Can you talk a little bit more about how you do that balance between modernization and innovation and solving all of these problems that the world has, with technology, but doing it in a way that is sustainable, and that you can make sure that if you disappear tomorrow and go to another agency or something happens, that that is going to continue moving forward?
Little wins, prove it, little wins. And the little ones add up to the big one. Just showing that commitment, showing that that drive, and then more importantly, being a person of integrity. Like, I mean, so I think Bill, I like tattoos, and I have a lot of tattoos on me, right? And so I have 3 words written in my native tongue of Telugu on my right arm, and it's Dharma, Ahimsa, and Satyagraha, right? And so Satyagraha means being truthful, being as honest as you can be. Ahimsa is always being nonviolent and trying to be calm. And then Dharma is that's your law code, right? And so I have that personally tattooed on my body because it reminds me every day of how I need to compose myself. Am I a proper practitioner of it all the time? No. Do I fail? Absolutely. But I look at that to remind myself to try to maintain myself in an appropriate manner as possible. And so it comes back down to answering the question of like the integrity piece, little wins, proving your point through action and not just talking stuff, right? And so I'm more of a walk the walk, not talk the talk. And that has helped me an awful lot by proving, like being fastidious about everything I do. Again, and it comes also in part, like you have to have a good team around you, a team that wants to be learning and growing. And I'm fortunate again, at my current position with BIS, that Jeremy has done a great job in empowering and being he's a very ethical driven leader, and that helps a lot when you've got someone who has a good ethical sense in their head, because they are too, like driving for a proper and fair model. Now, I think again, we were very fortunate, Bill, to have someone like Maria at the helm, and Guy, because they were very driven to do the right thing as best as they possibly could. Sometimes I felt like we were probably biting more off than we could eat, and so we needed to think through that a little bit better. But it's all about having the heart in the right place.
So taking that, to the care part, right? And if you think about IT transformation and a little bit on the change side, there's the constant debate of, do you go all cloud? Do you have a hybrid approach? Do you have some different different mix? What has been kind of, again, in your new role as you kind of come in, how do you again, sitting down at the table, having a pie and a Coke, like IT transformation in your world, what does that look like, and kind of a lessons learned approach to that?
Well, funny enough, Bill and I had that conversation a few years ago when he first joined on, and he made an astute comment that I was like, okay, I appreciate that, because originally OMB had a cloud first policy, right? Everything just had to go straight into the cloud, and then Bill kind of modified that approach and said, maybe not cloud first, but cloud smart. And there was some and there's some truth to it. I believe and firmly believe that cloud is a very good solution, but it's a tool in the toolkit, and so you have to make sure all tools are in the toolkit. And there is a place, there are particular instances where maybe an on-premise environment makes more sense. And again, it comes down to the nature of the work that is being done, and the budgets that are allocated for said work. So you always have to keep in mind what my budget today is today will also be the same for tomorrow. So you just have to be very effective and appropriate with that. And so I think for us at BIS, probably the hybrid cloud approach makes sense, given the fact that we have both FISMA moderate and FISMA high systems. And so the FISMA moderate systems definitely cloud, but the FISMA high systems aspects of it may have to be on premise. We're still working through the next phase of that architecture in the future state. For now, down the road, I'm hoping that FISMA high platforms and cloud can be even more effective than ever. And and the evidence is showing that it is, and that's not and that's great. I'd like to just make sure, like, when we start thinking about years 3, 4, 5, that we have that transition point, so that if we can feasibly adopt a FISMA high cloud more effectively and appropriately for some of the mission needs of BIS, absolutely, I'm all for it. But it's, again, it's architecting out the map and then following the milestones as best as possible while being agile. Like, if FISMA high cloud becomes more feasible sooner, then yeah, turn it on. Not against it at all. And there are aspects of it that are working now. So but again, it's just when the business requirements have hit a point of maturity to be able to handle that.
I certainly, the check is in the mail for plugging my policy there. So number one, thank you for mentioning that. For more information, please see my published works. But getting to the heart of the matter, I mean, this is something that we were talking about before, and you and I have been talking about for a while now, which is the concept of risk, right? When we're talking about what belongs where, when we're talking about what agencies can do sustainably, like you were mentioning this in the prep call, that government is it's not really managing its risk, it's just avoiding risk, right? In a lot of these cases. And obviously, because of the way FISMA is written, to have a single neck to choke, people are not willing to take risks which would be acceptable in the private sector. And instead, we are forced to use these outdated methodologies, outdated concepts, because people haven't migrated and matured on this path because it's too risky. Can you talk a little bit about, like, where you're sitting now? Obviously, you have a different concept of risk that you have to manage and trying to find that balance. How are you approaching it as a CIO who, again, is, I mean, for lack of a better term, the neck to choke at your agency, according to the law, to balance that risk?
Yeah, so we're taking risks, like, and I'm pro risk. I'm also pro, like, give me the data to back it up. And so I would say the critical thing to remember is that taking ownership for the decisions that are made. If you're willing to take ownership for the decisions that are made, you're okay with you know what your risk tolerance will be. I'm okay with the decisions I have to make. And I'm okay with moving the needle. And I'm okay with raising the points and making the most effective argument I can to my leadership. And, if I fall on my sword, I fall on my sword. Life goes on. I can always go back and be a coffee jockey.
There's always money in coffee,
Right, exactly.
especially as long as tech continues to exist.
Oh, I know.
So we've got a question out here that I think just in kind of the discovery and going into a new organization, and you actually touched on a little bit earlier in the discussion. But with automation and movement to the cloud, what are some strategies for people who fear that their job may be replaced or need to be retooled?
That's a great question. And thanks, Chris, for the softball. Chris does some great work for our team. So I'm glad to see he's here today's panel. I've said this before, when we think about AI and ML, it was funny. It was one of the senior guys at IBM I saw him speak. We were talking about some stuff, and he used a term that I really liked a lot, and I embedded it into my lexicon since. He said, it's not artificial intelligence. For example, he says it's augmented intelligence. So with automation AI, ML, all that stuff, we should be looking at these tools for augmenting the way we do work, not replacing the way we do work. If it helps us be a little bit more effective, that's awesome. For example, I would talk about this during my life at SBA with the various digital products like SBIR.gov, SBA.gov, stuff like that. Those were digital ambassadors. They were more than just a website, they were a digital 24/7 digital ambassador that spoke about the programmatic offerings and policy regs that SBA oversaw. And so I thought, to tell people, hey, at 2 a.m, you're an entrepreneur struggling through your business plan or struggling through this finance cap table or whatnot, and you're looking for some guidance and trying to figure out who's available at 2 a.m. Go to SBA.gov or SBIR.gov and get some insight or information and some self training and self knowledge to build up your requisites a little bit more. And so the way I referred to it a lot is like, all I'm trying to do is advance the IQ a little bit further for those folks, so that when they do have that engagement with an SBA resource, official, whether it's a Fed or a resource partner or whatnot, they're not having that stupid first 5-10 minutes, like, who am I, who are you conversation. They can get right to the meat of the question and say, hey, I'm so-and-so. I saw here on the site information about cap tables. I've got a question that relates to how do I, meet the requisites for the cap table to get the, maybe the 7A loan or whatnot. Do you have any insight that can help me make sure I'm eligible for a loan?
So, I mean, drilling in a little bit here and thinking about the staffing behind that too, right? So to Chris's question a little bit more, just drilling down, you started to hint at it a little bit there. I mean, technology is about change, right? Government agencies are expected to perform in ways that we never have before. The private sector evolves constantly. And I guess that's the other side of the coin, if I can wax poetic for a second, from risk, right? Is that there's the constant need for this change and to meet people where they're at. And that means that agencies that are really good at this sort of transformation stuff have built that change into their culture, right? Like, your staff is aware that your job today may not be exactly the same as your job tomorrow. You're going to be expected to do new things and respond to new conditions. Can you talk a little bit more about that from like sort of the workforce side, how you approach your people, how you prepare them for what's coming tomorrow?
The way I kind of viewed it was just like, look, when I talked, and look, I was not always a fan favorite with some folks at SBA because I was disrupting the systems a lot. But I was doing it in a manner that was like, look, we have to get out of the rut and we have to be in the new. I kind of brought it back down to like, don't you want to go home and hang out with your family? Do you really want to be fielding a phone call at like 9 p.m., midnight, addressing a concern? Or do you want that, to help that person be able to address their concerns on their own a little bit with self-knowledge and self-learning, so that they can come back to you and you can have a more meaningful conversation? I think that's how I probably approached it best. I mean, that 7 years was a blur, so I don't always remember everything, but I think that was the way it did. And I see it was funny, building off of that, I see one of the panel attendees is asking about human-centered design, and so I think that was always built into our premise. It was always about how do we take the gov bureaucracy speak out of it and make it plain speak. And Amber Chowdhury helped an awful lot with that stuff before she went over to Treasury. So I can't speak to what's going on currently because I'm no longer at SBA, but I know that was at the forefront of our conversations in my mind a lot when I was there.
But even outside of SBA, is that something that you look at even in your current? Because
Yes.
I mean, missions are missions, right? I mean, there are people involved in it. And I know Bill and I've had extensive conversations around kind of the human-centered aspect of things. And I know that's what we talk to a lot at MorphWorks as well. Again, it's an advocacy, so to speak.
Yeah, no, it's at the center of what we're doing, especially, now that we just finished up uh, the hardware update and now focus on the software. A lot of that is driven around like meeting that human-centered design aspect for the different stakeholders, and making sure we're addressing the needs of each stakeholder as effective as possible. It's funny, BIS, again, like when I arrived there, they were still running devices on Windows 7 hardware that dated back to 2002, 2004 timeframe of servers. We're talking some serious legacy debt, technical debt of maybe 15 plus years. And so over the course of 9 months, me and the team just got right to it to get everyone into Windows 10, into O365 Cloud, just getting them onto more modern day standards. And so around December of last year, we had just pretty much cleaned up and got it all squared away and rolled it out over the last couple of months. And so now, like, I have a joke going, a standing joke. It's like, it's now been 1 month. It's been 1 month, actually, at the last meeting I said, it's been 1 month where we've not had real email trouble. Like, email did not crash because that was a constant thing. Every week the email would crash.
Well, but you said through the hardware and the software side, but even on the hardware has, like, people are literally tied to that hardware, right? It's
Oh yeah.
working fine. I really like it. I know how to use it. It's tangible. All of those aspects. I mean, they cover everything that we've talked about. But even the hardware is a hard, no pun intended, hard chain.
It is. No, you're right. It's funny. When we think about mobile devices, for example, right? So this past year, I went and got myself personal phone, iPhone 12, right? And I usually soup out my device so that it lasts a good few years because I make a serious investment in it. And it was funny because, like, I was not a fan of the iPhone 7 I had prior to, but the iPhone 5 I loved. But I had to switch at some point from the 5 to the 7 because it was starting to get to that point where it's like, all right, got to have a new phone. Otherwise it's going to get clunky and not working properly. And it was the same when the 7 was starting to go kaput. It was like, all right, time to go for the 12. But everything's got a life expectancy, and so you just got to be ready for that next change when it happens.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the thing about all of this, like, technology stuff, again, going back to the, like, HCD, human-centered aspect to all of this stuff. Like, we're not, well, hopefully most of us aren't, like, deploying to cloud to get the Lucite trophy that goes on the shelf, right? We're doing it because our customers need a service, and so it's not just about, like, updating for the sake of updating. It's about, like, email goes down once a week. We need to make sure that email doesn't go down once a week so that people can do their jobs, so that people can get access to the services they need, so the American public is served. It's about that building capacity and building capabilities. It's not just we want shiny things for the sake of shiny things, right? So it's really, to your point, like, it's like starting with what the humans are expecting. Email should be up, and working your way back from that. How do we make sure that email stays up? Well, there's this thing called the cloud, and that can be helpful for it, right?
Yeah, and yep. And I think I give credit to my team. They took it seriously when I got there, and I said, "Look, we have to do this." We had some hard, long, tough conversations, but the team got it. They upskilled over the 9 months. They embraced. Instead of getting fearful of it, they started to embrace it. Realized that they needed to be part of that culture change, and have been really taking it is part of their ethos and being mission driven on it all. And a part of it again was just giving them top cover, giving them that empowerment and having their back. I've always made it clear, if you're a hard worker working for me, you will always get my top cover and protection. But I got, I'm now 2 for 2, right? So, like, of my folks, that leadership development training programs, stuff like that, they weren't doing it. They weren't getting access to it, whatnot. So I started Jeremy and I started making sure folks got access to those opportunities pretty quickly. I came on soon after Jeremy came down to help, right size the ship. And now I'm 2 for 2 for getting folks into the Gov21 leadership program that the Partnership for Public Service does. And I've got folks now more interested in learning more and trying to understand how they fit in the gears of government, and not just being technocrats, but understanding how to be the technology with the business needs, and understanding the business needs. They're it's starting to really click in their head more and more. Like, how do these pieces of the puzzle fit, and how do I be more effective steward for our stakeholders?
Right.
So it looks like Chris might have a hidden story here. So he's asking, do you have any stories regarding forced acceleration to the cloud due to COVID-19, et cetera? One of his was a data center that overheated and sprinkler system destroyed 400 servers. I think as probably kind of one of the last questions we'll be able to get here to kind of the finale before we get your special drink recipe.
Yeah, there are a few, but I think I'm going to hold off on that right now. There were a couple that were pretty sensitive, and I don't want to embarrass anyone.
Fine, we'll bring you back next time.
Bill and I were both like stunned when it happened, and we were just like, oh my! It was a programmatic office, and we'll leave it at that. It was, there have been some news stories about it, and we fixed it, but I will just say that it was definitely, when that was happening, I remember getting that phone call at like 9-10 p.m. that night, and they're like, this is happening, and I was like, wait, what? and it just happened that folks on my team had noticed that because we have some at SBA, there's is Shadow IT still there, man?
I mean, does it ever go away?
Okay. So it was a platform that we did not have oversight on, like, and we have been working towards getting some oversight on it, and but shit hit the fan, and my team ended up having to step in and rectify the problem pretty quickly. And
I think those are, quite honestly, before we get to your recipe, I think those are stories that, I can think of in my career, operationalization happening because security standards were deployed on a network, and all of a sudden you realize it's not 1,000 applications, it's 100,000 applications, right? And I think that happens, a lot, and I think that that is something that organizations need to think about is how do you keep a handle on everything that is going on, right? Without it being that, well, you just don't understand our mission.
Yeah.
As you kind of work through those, you need to, you absolutely need to think through, okay, well, wait a second, like we're all one team, all focused on the overall mission, and then being able to balance that. But plenty of stories in my history as well that you get shocked that I think we had one guest talk about that they hadn't clicked the button to say turn security on, and so they thought it was being done, but they didn't realize that and then you sit there and go, okay, why is that one not an automated one, right? So
yeah, I am pretty excited. I saw, like, with some of the new leadership coming on board for SBA, they're folks who I've worked with in the past, so and they've been great people. I will say Isabel Guzman, who's going to become the new administrator for SBA. She's a wonderful lady. I had a great working relationship with her during my time at SBA when she was there before. I think she'll bring some new, fresh perspectives to help move the needle forward. But I saw last night my friend Dalawar Syed. He's an IT guru. I don't know if folks realize that. He's a VCPE IT guy from the Valley. He's going to be great. He's just got announced as the nominee for the deputy administrator position for SBA. So I sent Delaware a note last night saying, "Whoa, this is real!" And he was excited, and he's like, "Yes, we need to catch up." It's always fun when you see old friends all of a sudden coming back up into the ranks, and you're like, "Hey, it's been a hot minute," and they're like, "What's going on?" Wanting to catch up. So I think SBA's IT next phase of modernization efforts are going to get a nice boost up with Delaware as deputy administrator. He's very sharp. He was the president of Freshworks. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that company, but he was over there. He's done some really cool stuff, and he knows his stuff really well. So I think that will be a very strong asset for the agency.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of people that I recognize from the private sector that I'm excited to work with again. So I think it's a great time to be at SBA. Shame you left, but you know we'll keep on keeping on.
Look, man, you gotta ride your horse.
I hear you.
And Commerce is great too. Like I said, there's some great leadership coming on over at Commerce. I'm excited for Secretary Raimondo. She's now the confirmed, and she's got a venture capital private equity background, has done some great work in Rhode Island. So I'm excited for her to come in because she'll bring some new perspectives. And I've also seen some great picks come in for the different bureaus at Commerce. So I'm excited. I think there's some great people coming online who are going to help move the needles forward.
Well, I think that we're all getting some influx of people, and you know, it's looking like it's going to be a better time for government here for a little while now that we're getting through some of our hurdles. So I'm afraid we are about out of time. But wanted to thank you again for coming on the show. And honestly, it's just good to see you and get to hang out again. It's been a minute. So thanks for coming on, man.
No, thank you, Bill. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Kirsten and Nicole, for helping set this up.
Kirsten and Nicole, do you want to snap a quick picture?
Yeah.